recording in this one, so just be mindful. I don't intend on showing anything that would be student facing or not being able to be available through our recording. But just for that sake, as you're talking through or sharing some ideas, just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. All right, let's dive into Copilot, right? I'm going to start by sharing my screen. You should just see our Widener home screen. I'm just at widener.edu. Um, One thing I want you to keep in mind is the system we're looking at today, Copilot, is not just what we tend to hear as a large language model, right? That is a piece of Copilot. That's essentially what your Claude and your Chat GPT and that kind of stuff is centered around. Copilot's branding is much more around being an AI assistant. Okay, so the difference between that is that we don't just have the chat features. You'll see the Copilot throughout everything of the Office 365 ecosystem. So that's where they kind of get that AI assistant realm, right? You see it in Word, you see it in your email, you see it in your PowerPoints, you see it in Forms, so it's everywhere. So that's where the kind of the assistant part comes in. Additionally, knowing that there are multiple levels of permissions within this product, right? So the things that we're looking at here today, as we're looking and exploring here in spring 2026, might come even further if you're watching this video in fall of 26 or summer of 26. We're going to look at some things here today, even within Copilot, that at this point are grayed out. They're just saying coming soon. So those things will be available as we kind of make our way down the road. But there's so much that we can cover here today that isn't necessarily in the coming soon realm. But know that this is always growing, always kind of coming up above the water here. So I'm going to start on winery.edu. One of my favorite places to start, and you can obviously get to Copilot in a bunch of ways, is I'm just going to Woo Links and clicking on Office 365. Okay. When you used to open this Office 365 link, it kind of just opened to what used to be our waffle in the top left-hand corner where you just kind of saw all your tools on the page. Okay. Now, when we open to the Office 365 link, you kind of land on this Copilot starting screen. Okay. There's a lot going on here, right? You can see that it gives you your apps to start up at the top. It gives you some ways to start with Copilot, some other integrations, and you'll see this screen starts to change as we kind of make our way through the system. If for some reason you're working on a machine that doesn't have our Office 365 plethora of apps, you can always come up to this top here and just do install apps. Okay. Or if you already have these apps on your computer, like here, I already have Word on my computer. And when I bring this up, you'll see my name in the top right-hand corner. It might be just a matter of you signing in to make sure that you get all of your features there. Okay. Now, one other really important piece to remember is that, again, when we talk about the Office 365 ecosystem, you have applications and then you have the online version. So here you're looking at my Word application. Okay. Now, I have not updated my Word application. That's why you do not see Copilot in the top right-hand corner in my corner of Word. Okay. If you're using the newer version of Word, you'll see that Copilot in the top right-hand corner. I have gotten those inquiries before of, hey, how comes I can't see it? 99% of the time, it's just we need to update Word or PowerPoint or whatever tool we're using. So just be mindful of that. If you come in
I
and
am
you click
muted.
on your
Yeah,
tools
am I muted?
through
I don't
your,
know.
if you click on your tools through the online version, like if I click on my online Word here and it brings up Word in a browser and I can create a new document, like of course I'm already signed in. You'll see that we get Copilot up here in the corner. Now, keep in mind, everything's web-based. So sometimes it turns for a second. Sometimes the screen doesn't load right. We go back to our basics of that. Sometimes we might have to sign out, sign back in. We might have to try a different browser. So just kind of keep that in mind. Everything is web-based. But you'll notice here I am in Word, and then here you get your Copilot in the top right-hand corner. So again, it's not just the chat feature, the large language model of, hey, can you help me with this? Or hey, how can I be more creative here? It's also embedded in all of these tools to help with your functionality and things like that. Okay, so we'll start there. with kind of our overarching message. Okay. Um, let's kind of dive in here to what they call a chat. Okay. And a chat is really where our brain goes the majority of the time when we talk about a large language model. It's kind of asking the questions, it's coming up with that prompt of what it is. And we're going to spend some time here in a little bit talking about prompts and writing good prompts and what that might look like. That is its whole own topic. Okay. There are courses out there, presentations out there, YouTube videos, LinkedIn learnings just on writing prompts, right? So not just about the tool, not just about how it can help you as a nursing professor, just on how do I write a good prompt and what does that look like? So we'll work on some of that here today. Now, some of that can be very straightforward. As you can see, it kind of gives you some things to start with because you're in the Office 365 ecosystem. It sees things you're working on, right? So one of those things that I'm working on was a nursing process PowerPoint, right? So it's already prompting you to say, oh, I see you have this PowerPoint. Would you like me to list the key points from this PowerPoint? And already this should be thinking, wow, as a student, this would be marvelous, right? I provide my students with a PowerPoint that's 97 slides long. And wouldn't it be nice to get a synopsis or a quick key points of those 97 pages? So already a good use there on the student side. Okay. Maybe I'm asking it to draft an email for me looking for feedback on a certain proposal or something that I sent out to a colleague. Some of those things that are out there. Now, the way I think of this is a starter, right? You think about a starter log you put in a fireplace, right? That is the beginning. You're always adding your own fire, you're always moving the fire around, you're always making sure it's under control. At the end, it's your fire, right? But you started with that starter log. That's exactly what this is. So you need to get the wheels turning. How can I do this? What does this look like? What are some questions I might come up with here? It's a great way to kind of get the wheel started. Is it the end product? No, you still have to maintain the fire. You still want to make it yours. It's still yours at the end of the day. You're still putting your name on it, but it's a good way to kind of get it started. Okay. So that's really where the chat starts. You know, you can kind of start from ground zero, be at the basis. You have a PowerPoint you want to start with, you have a basic question, and we'll dive into this here when you get into some of these chats that have already started. Now, the chats work a little bit like a filing system on your computer, right? So if you're thinking about this from an academic purpose, maybe your first chat is just the course name and the course number. So now every time you're going to work on something for patho or anytime you're going to work on something for med surg, you can always go back to that chat that you were working on prior, right? You're never starting from ground zero. You can always go back to those questions and those artifacts or resources that were produced to start, right? Or maybe you're working cooperatively with someone, you're going back and forth on a paper, and some of that stuff is there. You can always come in and rename that chat, share that chat with someone, have that out with someone else, so it can become a collaborative space within there as well. Okay. Now, outside of kind of dabbling in here on these chats, I just want to make my way down here on the left-hand side of this tool before we kind of dive into heavy uses and some cases that are out there, some ways that some other schools are using it, and some resources that might be available to us. Okay. So you'll notice here, I'm just right on my new chat. You do want to make sure that you're signed in down here at the bottom. You'll see that I have Andrew Boble. And you default to the basic chat. There is an upgraded version. You can hit upgrade that will send a request to ITS and TLT. I hit that about a week ago. Nothing has changed. So I'm not sure if they are upgrading, but you can always put that request in. But for the majority of stuff we look at today, we're perfectly fine. The reason why you want to make sure you're signed in is that it goes up to this enterprise data collection. You'll see up here at the top. That's kind of the university system, right? So as opposed to just logging into ChatGPT with your Google address, not as secure. So here you have a little bit more security of that extra layer with your Office 365 corporate stuff. So just got to keep that in mind with your enterprise data protection there. Excuse me. So making my way down here on the left-hand side, I was in new chat. I'm just going to come here to search. This is again, looking at everything that you're doing inside of your OneDrive ecosystem. It's seeing documents that I've looked at. Maybe you want to summarize this, you want to create a FAQ, you want to draft an introduction. It's really trying to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then that way it can do it for you, right? It becomes a little scary when you think about it, but when you drive into some of these uses, it's a lot of stuff that you're probably already doing. You might be doing some of it manually, but you'll be able to see how quick that the system and Copilot's able to do some of these things for you. So before I jump into kind of the search here, know that that's part of that. That's again looking at your OneDrive. So if you have something you want to summarize, an article you're working on, something like that, that's already saved, you can just come in and search there and utilize the Copilot features within that space. Coming down to your library, this is a place where things that you've already done are going to be. So if you've already created some pages or you've already created some images, this is a place where you'll be able to see those things within this list. For some reason, my library pages doesn't load very quickly. This takes quite a while. I've had the same reaction within my Chrome browser, so that just might be on my side. I do get my images to pop up pretty quickly, so I can click over here. And you'll see I worked on a Widener day, and then I was working on generating my own headshot. It doesn't really look like me, but I was able to upload my own photo. And my daughter was in this photo, so I was able to say remove my daughter from the photo and make the background a little bit more professional. But it doesn't look like me at all. So so that is one thing that that generative AI and kind of the Copilot stuff, that is one of the backfires. It doesn't really do that great with images that already were, right? If you were to ask it to create students in a classroom working on something, that image is going to be great, but it's not going to take the place of Adobe Photoshop, right? That's its own separate tool, kind of its own generation. So I'm sure those things will come much further. And here you're working in Copilot with images. Know that I've worked extensively in Google's uh, tool has they call it like Go Banana Pro or something is their image editor within their Gemini. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. Some of these tools do a little bit better. And then one of the things I was just messing around with was just creating a Widener Day poster. I'm going to show you that here in a second, where I literally just gave the details of Widener Day and it was able to kind of spit out the poster in 5 seconds, right? As opposed to me going in, choosing a color palette, finding all that stuff, moving it around. So we'll look at that here a little bit. So that is just leads me right into the create space. So that first one that you saw was over here. I just asked it to design a poster. You'll see that under my posters, I have just this Widener Day poster that I worked on here to start. And again, it takes a second. Da, da, da. Here it comes. So here's this Widener Day poster. I just said, here's my logo, design a poster for Widener Day on March 1st, 10 a.m. through 2 p.m. And that's what we got there. So you could obviously incorporate other images. You can incorporate other topics. This was just for Widener Day, but maybe you're holding an event or something special for another organization you're in or a class that you're a part of. So just kind of keep that in mind. Canva is another great tool that's out there, but your create within Copilot is really good here as well. You do get a chance to change your color palette. This would be amazing if we could come in and put our Widener letters and color palette codes in here. I have read that that's something that's coming in the future. Right now, it's just the generics, but we should be able to go in and put all of our regular codes there. So in the future, you can make everything with its own palette for that particular organization. So that should be pretty cool. Um, Outside of the creating the poster, you can see you have a whole bunch of things here. I'm not going to spend a ridiculous amount of time on that, but just kind of think about where your mind goes with all the things that you're doing in your daily life, not only with your classes, but in your advising role, in your leadership roles, working with your groups, working with your committees, all of those things. So creating images, creating videos, infographics, all of those things. I can really see, excuse me, the infographics are great for a method of your students learning. You think about how much information we kind of put on slides or how much stuff kind of comes apart in a 90-minute lecture or 2-hour lecture. And um, you as instructors know those quick hitting topics where students need a little bit more information. Or I'm always a big component of being an illustrator of your knowledge, right? Not just writing it, but making it come to life with colors or diagrams and things like that. Excuse me. And that can really help with your students when they're sitting in front of that multiple choice question and they close their eyes and they're trying to picture that information on their paper. They're not just seeing lines on a piece of paper, they're seeing that infograph, they're seeing that poster that was created about that content with some of that information that you know is going to be really important for them to remember for that upcoming assessment or for that upcoming test. So infographics are really good that way. Um, just kind of keep that in mind. You can always come in here. Let's see, let's say please create a infographic on the nursing process. So we know that this is something that we start in kind of 125, 202. We're constantly reiterating throughout the curriculum. And like a lot of things, sometimes, it takes a little bit of time for the students to recognize those steps. Maybe we have, some kind of tricky song or some kind of saying that, helps the students kind of remember that. It's always good to, again, come in and maybe allow the AI to find an opportunity to take what it already knows and create something. But what I really love about this feature is that you're not just stuck with what's already here. So you really get an opportunity to come in, and some of these things would only be available in a paid version of Adobe or in a paid version of Canva or something like that. You can come in here, you can edit the text, you can change the text, you can upload other media, other visuals, excuse me, different diagrams, things like that. So we'll give this a second here. We'll let this work. Excuse me. I love the arrows going in between each step, right? Because it's a process. We're seeing that this is something that is continuous. We're making our way through. Not only do we get the words and we get kind of a quick synopsis, but you get the little diagrams, right? Again, going back to being an illustrator of your knowledge. Now, when I think about planning, I'm not just thinking about the word planning, I can think about actually writing something down. And when I think about assessment, I'm not necessarily thinking about a test, I'm thinking about assessing my patient. So I'm thinking about that stethoscope and using my tools as a nurse that come along with that field. So it really does a good job of taking some of those pieces and putting it in. Maybe you want to come in, you want to add more detail, or you want to edit the text that's already there. You can just come in and drag that stuff over or edit that stuff that's already there. Again, another great piece that would really come in a lot of paid versions of tools, but you have that here. And then obviously you have the ability to just download this. So this becomes a PDF, it becomes an image. Maybe it's something that you're putting in a Canvas announcement or you're putting within a module, wherever that might be. Maybe you're grabbing this off of it and you're actually putting it within your PowerPoint and using this as an image within your PowerPoint along with the text that's been created, right? So a couple different uses, excuse me, that you might have here. And on top of that, you get the ability to not just do that basic text. Again, make it come to life, right? Really allow the students to create their own ways to remember, create their own recall mechanisms that can really help with the studying process and bringing some of that stuff back for them. All right. You'll notice here, and I have a bunch of tabs. I don't know if you can hear it, but it sounds like my computer's about to take off on my desk. So just kind of keep that in mind because you're using something that is, working in process. You saw my pop-up just come up. It looks like this browser is running a little slow. Just kind of keep that in mind because I have other items open that I want to show you. There might be a video running somewhere. Certainly this does not help. We've talked about this before, your Widener website. If this is playing in the background, this is really making your browser run hot. So if you're working inside of some of these things where you're doing creation or other items like that, you just want to kind of keep that in mind. If it sounds like your computer's about to take off and blow up, you probably heavy on the bandwidth there. Okay. Um, you'll notice when I came out of there, I lost my side menu. I've gotten this question 2 or 3 times. It's Where did everything go? It just uncollapsed. So up here, your top left-hand corner is your expand navigation ribbon. You just need to click that again to get that to come back. Okay. So again, here we were in create. We were looking at things like infographics, videos, stuff like that. Let's jump down to teach. Excuse me. This is a place where, again, we can get a real big bang for your buck as an educator, right? So let's take a look at some of this. You'll see that some of this, as I described to start, is in kind of the coming soon phase. So you can think about how much more use you could see, and especially with some of the things that we get down here with the standards and alignment with that, this can really take on a life of its own. But let's take a look at what's already here. One of these things is lesson plans. Again, kind of getting started. Obviously, you're the expert. For me, I'm not an expert on perioperative period and med surg nursing. So I was like, hey, let me get started with that. So I just asked to create a lesson plan on understanding the perioperative period as a med surg nursing student. Now think about you sitting down at your desk at a blank Word document and how long it would take you to come up with this content. Now, obviously, it's all in your brain. You're experts. But wow, what a great wheel. What a great way to get the wheels turning. I literally gave me this prompt, said, make me a lesson plan. Not only do I have objectives with great verbs and great terms that I can obviously change with apply, analyze, identify, and describe. I have different materials I might need, different outcomes I need, different things I need to consider, right? And it even broke it down into time, how much time I'm going to be spending on each one of these things. We're going to go into the chat where this is created. Now, not only does it give you the lesson plan, but then it prompts you, would you like me to create a slide deck based on this lesson plan? Would you like me to create or include the teaching notes based on this lesson plan? So all these places where as educators, we spend a great deal of time because a lot of times we're starting from scratch. You have a great wheel that's already spinning, right? Go in and make it your own. Or some of us, we know this because we see this every day. We go to maybe the book resources. Those book resources are very heavy. There's so much content in there. I think the Chat GPT, the Copilot, those AI tools do a really good job of kind of touching on the base layer, right? And then it allows for you as the expert to add the meat, right? It really gives you a good amount of fluff to start, but you as the subject matter expert can then come in and add those pieces that you know you need to make it your own, or your own experiences or your own real world adventures, those types of things that really gather the attention of your students as you're instructing, right? But a really good piece here, similar to something that you would find inside of your textbook resources, right? When you go on to point, it's here's a sample lesson plan, here's sample flashcards, all of those things. So this is just another tool in the toolkit. It's just giving you another opportunity to kind of dive into some other resources. Is it perfect? No. Me as being a non-subject matter expert in perioperative periods, would I know if this is wrong? No. But you being a nurse educator looking at this and teaching in med surg, you would know what's correct here. You would know what you need to admit for your sophomore students or what you need to have for your senior students. And you can make that judge on leveling and reaching all your students. So just kind of keep that in mind as it comes to you. Amira, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment.
Yeah.
I've done that in reverse order too. Like I've used a PowerPoint and asked AI to like create a lesson plan or create some talking points from the lesson, from the PowerPoint as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. A lot of times we kind of have one of the resources and it's like,
Mhm,
okay, I have this artifact, I have the lesson plan. Now I need something for the students to see. Or,
mhm.
I have this really good idea for my teaching. How can I know that my students know it? What's a really good assignment I can give them? How do I check for their understanding? So it can really kind of supplement those other pieces. So you're right, Amir, it can go the other way, right? I have the PowerPoint, I need to make a lesson plan, or I have the lesson plan, I need to make it a PowerPoint, or vice versa, whatever that might be. So both of those things are great. So kind of keep that in mind. That's here within your teach. Just on teach, this is curriculum planning. It's just lesson plan. You'll see that we have things coming with Minecraft lesson planning. Might be a little bit more towards the K-12 world coming to life there, but you could see some gamification aspects coming to life there. And certainly our engineering students might be very interested in that as well. Unit plans, right? Helps you kind of break it down a little bit more of an overarching concept. And, you have 14 days to teach. What should each one of those days look like? So it can really help you hatch out a timeline over a longer space. You can see that you're modifying existing content is all coming soon. But really love what this looks like at the base layer, especially that top one, aligning to our standards. So you think about everything that we already have. And okay, so what does this standard go to? What can I relate this to? What this will allow you to do is identify those nursing standards or identify those elements that you want to relate to and say, okay, here's my lesson plan. What standard does this meet? Or here's my unit, here's what I'm teaching, what standards are covered throughout my teaching. So a little bit of way to branch that out for you. Obviously, as you're looking at it, you see some of those connections authentically. But for some of those pieces, you might not necessarily think about teaching it that way. So it doesn't connect to that standard, but it might bridge some of those gaps for you. Obviously, we're always talking about reaching all of our learners. So you have something, some concept. How can you differentiate that for all of your learners? Um, Really important when it comes to key concepts and setting up that base knowledge. We know at the end of the day, all of our students are going to have to take the same test. But when it comes to building foundational knowledge or building background knowledge for your students as young learners within any curriculum, obviously here we're talking about the nursing curriculum, you really want to meet them where they are. And that's where the differentiation really gets your big bang for your buck. So when you're talking about your early classes of 125, 202, your Patho 1, Med Surge 1, before they get into 2 and 3, you're building the foundational knowledge. So when they get to 2 and 3, it's not, we never heard about that when they heard about it. It just didn't connect to them. Right. So in that case, we just weren't able to reach them where they were because half of the class is going to raise their hand and say, we heard about it. And the other half is going to say, we never heard about, but they were in the same exact class, right? So we just missed the opportunity to meet them where they were there, right? So the stuff that was a little bit too high went right over those learners' heads, and the stuff that was a little bit too low went right underneath the ones that were a little bit too high. So it's about kind of finding that sweet spot there. And we know that's tough, especially in some of our bigger groups. But we can find some opportunities for that. I'm going to show you one of those things within agents here in a little bit to hopefully help with that. All right. So we'll kind of work on that a little bit, modifying the reading level. I showed that to my wife the other day because she's a reading specialist. She can't wait to jump inside of that and see what that can do for, her things that she's working with students in kindergarten all the way up to, people who are struggling in high school and reading at a fourth grade level. So think about the uses that you could have with some of those K-12 worlds and some of those individuals that are working with students before they get into the higher education environment. Um, Let's jump here into homework. You'll see here with a rubric. You'll see here with a quiz. My rubric brain went right to our friends in what is that, 202, that's doing the paper that has 5 different parts, and we're meeting all throughout the year or whatever, wherever that is. So you're thinking about all the different rubrics, all the different conversations that happen throughout the year and what that looks like. Here you have the opportunity not only to have a rubric built, but you can, and I wouldn't always push you this way, you can provide artifacts, so a student submission, and ask for feedback based on said rubric, right? So the student submits their paper, you already have the rubric, and you prompt the AI tool to say, okay, here's the rubric. I would like you to give me feedback based on this assignment and this rubric outlined, right? And it can give you some talking points there so the student can find some room for improvement. Obviously, you are the end all be all subject matter expert there. But we know that some of that stuff can be, um, a little time consuming. And also, not only for you as an instructor, but something to identify for your students. Your students can do this. They have Copilot, right? So they can come in, they can say, here's my writing, here's what I've already done, here's the rubric. How can I make it better, right? How can I improve that? So we're not only looking at this from the lens of instructor or an administrator, whatever that is, but really lots of student uses here too. We're going to jump into a lot more of that when we talk about prompts as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. Another thing here is study aids. You'll have flashcards, fill in the blanks. We talked a little bit about fill in the blanks in the beginning of the semester at our workshop when we were talking about how do we engage these students in these large environments. And this took me back to my middle school social studies teacher. And everything he gave us was fill in the blanks because that's how he knew you were paying attention during his teaching, right? So as they're teaching the things that you're saying, they're saying the whole part, you're filling in the blanks on their sheet, right? So that can also be a study tool for students. Maybe you're uploading a PowerPoint and it will create the blanks there, or you have a study guide and it'll create the blanks there. That's something where you can create the artifact and you can provide that artifact, and then the AI creates the blanks, right? So it's not like, well, where do I put here or what do I need? So you can just come in to fill in the blanks. You can just paste or you can just upload, decide if it's going to be easy or challenging, and let it go. Obviously to be edited past that, right? But another good way to kind of boost a little bit of engagement there, and another study tool as students are making their way through the content. All right. So obviously this teach area will continue to expand as we make our way through. Again, I see it as a starting point, right? Or as Amir described, as a backtracking point. Maybe you already have the artifact and you're kind of making your way in there. So just kind of keep that in mind as that stuff comes to fruition. Okay. Um, all right. I showed us a lot so far. We're about a half hour in. Has anybody seen anything or anybody have anything they want to share before I jump into my next piece here?
The reading level, I know it's not available yet, but that'll be useful for consent forms when you have to drop a
I
consent
like
form
that.
to eighth grade reading level, and people struggle with that all the time. So that'll be really useful. Yeah, that'll be
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really good point. I think, especially when you're so hooked on the academic writing,
Yeah.
it's hard to be like, okay, well, what does that even look like, or what do I need to do here? So that can certainly give them a good starting point there. That's a good use there, Barbara.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
I think
Yeah.
I've done that with forms. When with the prompt, I just put whatever the topic is, and then at this reading level.
Hmm.
Perfect.
I have a
Mm.
question for you, Andrew. So right now I do a lot through Notebook LM, because that's when I did that, thing with at the university in the
Yeah.
May. So I do a lot for Pop Health, and now I'm starting to do AI generated podcasts. So is there something here, or should am I gonna have to continue doing that? Is there something here that would have that capability? Percent.
I haven't taken it that far. What
Okay.
is very unique about the Notebook LM is that it gives you the cooperative conversation, right?
Okay.
It's giving usually two people talking back and
That's
forth and
how it
kind
is
of
for Notebook
yeah,
LM. It's
yeah,
the
the
same
podcast
thing.
here.
Yeah.
Anything that I've done here from audio has just been one. Now, given I haven't
Oh,
prompted to say I need two people speaking to it or kind of taking it that far,
okay.
but I think that the Notebook LM is unique in that facet that it will produce that type of learning content based on
Okay.
whatever you're uploading. Will that maybe come to fruition and kind of maybe this, right? I could see that in the study aids
Mhm.
kind of area, right? Because they do a lot with the mind mapping and kind of the
Yeah, they have
graphic and stuff in there
infographics,
too.
they have quizzes and
They
things
do a
like
great
that all
job
in
in there.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other question I have for you, so if I'm going to, because I did this when we did our emergency disaster last year, because
Yeah.
it's hard to like make up cases for people, to like for role playing. So if I just went into new chat and just put, create roles of whatever, I'm not going to divulge our, emergency disaster at this point, but if I put that in new chat, that's where you could generate the roles that
100%.
okay,
Yeah,
that's what I
100%.
thought. Okay.
And kind of continue to prompt there, right?
Okay.
Because you think about the first, you'll get an output, and then it's, okay, well now change this role to this person, or I want role number one to be crying and have more empathy for the situation, and you
Yeah,
can kind of build it from there.
it's a good starting line. I mean, I
Yeah.
did that and we tweaked it for last year, but it was a good because instead of having to make up all those cases, it's really hard when you have different victims. So
Yeah.
that's a great, okay, good. That's
Yeah.
what I thought. Thank
Yeah, I
you.
love all that. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what, again, as you kind of come down to chat. So Lori talked there about kind of starting a new chat. So here, let's see, we can go to the beginning of this one, right? So here I had an article. It is this article: Influence of AI Ethics, Awareness, Attitude, Anxiety, Self-Efficacy on Nursing Students and their Behavioral Intentions. God, I don't want to read that at all. I don't want to read that whole article. It's 8 pages. It's got more stuff than I need. I just want the key points, right? So, really good use of the chat is summary of the article, right? So here's 189 students in Korea. Here's what they found. It gives you kind of the self-efficacy stuff, what they thought about. Here's your main conclusion. Now, I prompted it after that of I want discussion points for my students. I prompted them to read this article. I want things to be able to talk about with my students afterwards. What can I talk about? How does exposure shape that confidence? And here's a real world connection, right? So I can build off of that and bring that to their frontal lobe as we're talking about that. How do attitudes affect willingness and use of technology? Um, why does AI in education matter, and why does that matter for the future of our career? So not only can you take something that already exists, but again, it allows you to build the learning around it, right? I was able to summarize it. I was able to get those key points. I took it a step further. I asked for a ready to use worksheet that I could use here. Now, obviously, here, this is a place where it can improve. Let's see if I still have this up. I do not. Let's see, where were we? Oh, here's my printable worksheet. Probably not the best, right? So there's an aha moment of, okay, I got really good talking points there. It did a really good job of kind of creating some key takeaways, but this isn't necessarily that something that I would put in front of my students, right? This is something that I could have easily done on a Word document right there. So that artifact is something that probably could have been a little bit better there. Excuse me, but maybe you take some of that and you bring it up here to the create and you create more of an infographic with it, right? Or you create more of a poster with it so that when you're looking at it, it's not just black and white text on a paper. It's more of a prompt or a think about moment when the user's actually seeing it. So similarly, as we're talking, when you're talking about your chats, you can really build on these. So again, maybe I was working on this for a particular class, so I can always come in and rename this to that class name. And then that way, every time I'm working on something for that class, I can go back to that same exact chat. I don't have to start over from square one to do that. Okay. Um, so lots of good features there, especially on the backtrack. And you can see I have many chats here, different things that I've worked on, different things that I've come into. Here was, we're going to jump into this, I think, a little bit in the care plan area, but this was, I have a 43-year-old African male with sickle cell anemia. The nurses plan to assess circulation and lower extremities every 2 hours. Which of the following outcome criteria would nurses use? So just kind of talking points and what can I do to create a care plan around the scenario? Again, giving you a good starting point of what that might look like, but then also being able to take some of those places and provide similar questions, right? And this is where I think some of us might struggle a little bit in the remediation topics, right? We have the content, we have the test question. Okay, how do I know the student gets it now after remediating? What's another way I can ask a question about this same topic? Or, what can I do to change this question stem or change the answer choices or things like that that can really kind of help with the wheels spinning there. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, all of this really builds back onto one of the biggest features that you'll see within an Office 365 and a lot of the large language models. Again, we're talking about this as an AI powered assistant, but here we use the term agents. And an agent is just kind of your buddy, is the best way I can describe it. It's kind of this other tool outside of just using your normal chat. It's a way for you to handle specific roles. So think about an agent as an HR assistant or as a sales tracker or as a data researcher. One of the videos that I'm going to share here, I'll show you a little quick bit of it. She has a reflective thinking agent. And it's just a way for her to take any content that she's working on. She enables her reflective thinking agent, and it automatically comes up with reflective thinking questions based on that concept, right? So you're probing questions. How do you take them to the next level as the learner? So that's one of those ways. So when you look at your agents along the left-hand side here, you have it's if it's blank, it's because you haven't done anything to add. So you can always come up here to the top, do new agent. And this is your agent builder. This is where you build from scratch. We'll give this a second here to load. So there's a couple ways to capture this. Again, this in itself could probably be its own multi-workshop session when you talk about building agents and what this looks like and its different uses. Um, if you are going to dive into agents and using some of these specific uses, I would encourage you to find some other supplemental learning, and I'll provide some of that for you here. But there's a lot of good videos out there, some good webinars where they spend a great deal of time diving into this specific topic, just agents, not looking at the tool, not looking at the other things that are available, but some of the things that can be done inside of here. So really the place where you want to stay is your describe phase. That helps you build all the things that are going to be inside of the configure tab. If you come into describe and you start to build here, it will populate into configure. Now, if you know everything you want, you know the name of your agent, you know the description of your agent, you know the instructions, all of that, you can come in here and build that if you want. But for a lot of us, we're probably looking at this and we're like, well, what do I even put here? What are the instructions? What are the description? So let's take a look at one that they already have made for you. And I found this underneath all agents. You'll see that they have some here that are built by Microsoft. They have some that are featured that might work with other things that you might be using, like Dropbox or Mural or Backlog or things like that. And then there's other ones that might have been built by other companies like Canva or your stuff that's used on Monday.com, or here's another place for your prompts, things like that. But again, it could be its own thing. What I'm going to work on here is underneath see more coach. Okay. So all I did here was I just clicked on learning coach and I clicked add. Okay. When you click add, that's going to put it over here to the left. Maybe you're a junior and or a senior and you're applying to externships, you're working on job interviews, you want to add your career coach. This is a way you can upload your resume, help you get ready for interviews, things like that. So they have different things in here for different uses. But I thought that the learning coach can really help us kind of hit home with some of the things we're working on. Maybe you're working on a scholarship project. They have a writing coach inside of there and you need some help with that. So something to look at there. But let's jump on this learning coach. You'll notice here that when I click on edit, I can get back to this space where we saw this kind of empty space in your new agent, where what is the description? What are the instructions? So this is the learning coach. This is what's already made. The learning coach helps you master subjects, refine skills, and customize learning. So what does it do? It helps support your learning coach. It helps break down complex concepts. It helps refine your skills. It helps with your learning process. It helps create a learning plan. It helps for preparing a test. So what it really does is it takes all of those individual prompts that you might be putting inside of a chat and it puts them in one place in an agent, right? So as opposed to uploading a document and saying, please create a learning path. Now, please prepare a test. You're taking an agent that can take a lot of those prompts and do them in one space with one artifact right off the bat, right? Another use for here is this was a webinar from Office 365, and she made her reflective thinking agent. And inside of this, it allowed for self-assessment and improvement strategies. So when she uploads items and she adds it as into the reflective thinking agent, it kind of runs through these questions. So how well do you think you did during the day? What activities or tasks or things that could you get better at? What could you improve on? What strategies helped you improve on things? What was your performance for future lessons? How could you apply that to things that you learned today? It allows you to take those pieces where maybe those internal dialogue pieces might be occurring after you're teaching, and again, prompt it with AI. Okay. Now, some of this we might be thinking, well, I don't know how I'm going to use this. What does this even look like for me? One of the pieces that I thought Agents does a really good uh, piece with. And again, my mind goes back to keeping track of standards and seeing where we've kind of met those standards or where we're meeting them in accreditation parts, pieces like this. So inside of your agents, you get the ability to upload knowledge. Okay. And your knowledge is pieces that the agent is taking into consideration when it's working. Right. So here, again, I might be thinking about a rubric, or maybe I'm thinking about the essentials. I can upload the website that the essentials are on, right? And now when my agent is working, not only is it taking into an account its own nursing processes, it's also looking at the knowledge that you have provided for that particular agent. So you could say, how does this lesson meet domain one? Or how can I modify this lesson to incorporate more of the strategies from domain four? And because you provided that knowledge and those artifacts to the agent, it goes back to domain four. It looks what the criteria is for domain four. It looks at your lesson and says, okay, here's where we can meet it in the middle, right? So you really give it an opportunity to make it your own, right? And maybe it's not just the domains. Maybe it's a rubric from another site, or maybe you're comparing to another product that's out there or something like that. So you really have the ability to build out different URLs. The one caveat here is the URL or the product needs to be public, right? So you can't say, here's my Canvas rubric and put in your Canvas URL. Office 365 is not going to be able to navigate to your instructor class to be able to get that. So how do you work around that? No problem. You go into Office 365, you go into OneDrive, you upload your rubric or you upload your assignment, and you make it a public sharing link, right? And then that way, when you share the link or the URL here, it's a public site, and now it can use that as part of the artifact in the agent. All right. So we have some ways around some of those things if you want to use those pieces there. All right. Now we might be thinking again, how can we use this for our own? So let's take a look at maybe, let's see, I think I have one or two items where this is already being used. Let's jump here to Duke, right? So how is the Duke School of Nursing leading the way in AI enhanced teaching? They have a couple pieces in here where their faculty are not only using AI to support their Copilot Studio. So here we have that. They have people who've used this as study buddies, a lot of ways that we've described it, kind of uploading the content, having the students build on top of that, having them answer questions, kind of build some other supplemental learning that might be there. One of the other ways that I liked it is just kind of just again describing it as a tutor, right? It's a tool in the toolkit. So it's allowing them to again just kind of have something to bounce ideas off of outside of just Googling it, right? It's kind of Google on steroids here when you look at it to be for its use cases. I thought this was a really good piece that AI was being used for. This is at the University of St. Augustine inside of their health science building. Um, they used AI to build a agent chatbot, and that was a disgruntled patient, right? So what it is it's providing scenarios where the chatbot is coming across as a patient who's ticked off, right? So it's teaching the students to deal with that type of patient and that type of scenario, which again, a lot of our students get in a clinical setting. Kind of hard for us to create within our own space because our personalities are our personalities. We can only do so much role playing, right? But you do have the ability to kind of build that here. I think that that's something that, again, we're not necessarily at that place here in Widener School of Nursing at this moment, but a place where we can go, right? That's certainly a place where we might be able to venture into, and something I think that not only our instructors would get great use out of, but something that our students would get great use out of, and maybe even piggyback off of, the scenarios that Lori was talking about at the beginning of the year, right? You have different rooms that you go into, and one of those rooms is a disgruntled patient, and how do you deal with them in those situations and things like that. So some really good use cases that are out there. Again, you can find a lot of these. A lot of them come to fruition. Why? Because people are putting them out there, right? But find your current events, find some of that stuff that can kind of go through, and some of those pieces. And again, it's always growing, right? So you'll see that this stuff was here from August. Obviously, you're going to have new stuff here in the new year, new articles coming out all the time, all of those pieces. Okay. Um, One of the other things I wanted to bring your attention to is a extension of Copilot that is particular for nurses. And you might hear this term when you jump into a on a office setting that is utilizing Office 365 within it. It is called Dragon Copilot. Okay. Have any of us used the dictation services? I know that I've been in my pediatrician's office and they say, hey, do you mind if I use the dictation? And it's really just the pediatrician recording what's being said. So they have them for all of our notes. And that's essentially what the Dragon Copilot does for your electronic health records, right? So it's taking the Copilot features and your electronic health records that are already existing through Epic or whatever it might be, and using that as an add-on for some of the dictation and translation services within that piece. So that's a term that you might use as you're kind of making your way through. Amira.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify the agent thing before you moved on.
Sure.
So if I'm understanding correctly, building an agent would help as opposed to creating a new chat or keep going back to a chat that you previously created, and all of the topics within that subject or anything within that subject you would use your agent for because the agent is built for that specific topic.
Correct. It's
Okay.
really, you think about the agents, and again, it's more about the things that you're always doing, right? So we talked about here, like your learning coach, right? You're always trying to take the knowledge further, right? So how can I get better? What else do I need? The other one we looked at was the reflective prompts, right? So again, you already have this content. What other questions can I ask? You're always doing that. One of the other examples I came across was someone built an agent for their newsletters, right? So as opposed to coming in and creating a newsletter from scratch every month, they had an agent that they said, okay, I want the newsletter to look like this. I want a box of current events. I want a box of upcoming events. And they could come in and type that stuff out. And then that way the agent made the newsletter the same way every single time. Um, You'll find that a lot of the documentation is focused on a lot of the other corporate fields. For example, a lot of the stuff that I found talks about things that you could use it for in HR, or ways that you might use it inside of your sales tracker. For us, maybe a data researcher, maybe you're using it inside of your own data, but we don't track sales inside of our nursing curriculum, right? So the agent doesn't really make sense there for us, or we don't necessarily need an HR assistant, at our beck and call. But you could see at HR in their realm, if it's you have this continuous question, or you have to continually provide the same learning resources for something, you have an agent that can consistently provide those things in a click rather than recreating every time. Yeah, so I think for, let's say for our uses, we want to, continually have probing questions, or we want to continually provide, multiple choice questions at the end of our teaching. So maybe you have a multiple choice question agent, right? That you have prompted to not only take the content and make multiple choice questions, but inside of those questions, inside of your instructions here, you prompted to use 5 different levels of the Bloom's taxonomy, and one of those has to be create, right? So that's where you're giving it a little bit more specifics of how you want it to be used outside of just putting it in chat and saying, create 5 questions. No, you always want 5 questions. You always want 5 different levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and you always want one of them to be create. So you make an agent that does that for you every single time. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. So again, I found a lot of stuff out there. I think as it spreads its wings, we'll find some things that are a little bit more nursing centric when it comes to that stuff, but a lot of it is very overarching when you think about all the different roles there are in the system. Obviously, we live in the nursing world, but a lot of different ways that the Office 365 ecosystem is being used. Okay. Holy geez, I'm already at an hour. I didn't even get to my prompts. Okay, so really quick, okay, I have kind of my cheat sheet of everything that I'm kind of looking off of and going through as I'm talking to you here today. A lot of this will be inside of the email I send out to you to recording, but in a much friendlier way, right? So this is just my brain dump of resources and things I come across and ways I look at. But one of the things I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, and really one of the things I think we could get a really good bang for our buck and really push our students to, is their prompting within Office 365, or if they're using Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever that is, right? So some of this might be very basic stuff, so you could look at within your 125, 202, kind of introducing the AI. Other things are you want to build on it. So maybe it's knowledge synthesis content, right? You find those gaps of learning after they've taken benchmarks, things like that. So it's, here's where I want you to prompt. Let's work on coming up with some good prompts to expand your thinking on this concept, whatever that might be. So create a simulation or a case study about a patient and answer these questions, or write a nursing care plan for a patient with this diagnosis, or putting in your class notes and create multiple choice quiz questions with answers. These are 8 prompts that I feel like we could just give students at the beginning of the semester and be like, hey, here's how you can use it. Right. And then as you're making your way through, as you're going through PowerPoints, you can always say, hey, remember that number 4 prompt we worked on where we talked about clarifying difficult concepts? This is a great place to bring that in here. Right. So again, it's kind of that first day overview. Here's some of those things. But as much as, like I talked about in the beginning, as much as it is getting used to the tool and being able to use some of these features inside of this space, it's also about being successful and asking the correct thing in the right way so you get the best of the tool. So the prompts itself is its own kit and caboodle as you kind of think and make your way through the process. So just kind of keep that in mind. Always room for learning, always places where we can get better. I think if you had to concentrate on something, concentrate on prompting, right? Because the prompting goes across all of it. Here we're talking about Copilot, but you can write good prompts in all of these large language models, all of these AI assisted places where, you can really get a good bang for your buck if you're asking the right question to start. So the prompts is a good place to start there. And then obviously as you're making your way through here with all the teach, I didn't even get a chance to show you the PowerPoint that it made on the nursing process, literally in a click, right? Something that I probably would have had to spend at least 35 minutes on, making the template, making the background, dragging images around. It really came out good. Do I have it here? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I just want to show it to you because again, it was like click, click, boom. And it was just something that as an instructor, I feel like would have taken me much longer. Let's make sure my PowerPoint can open here for me. Oh, here it is. And what's really nice, again, because you're on you're in your Winer license, you're on OneDrive, everything you're doing is saving a copy somewhere. So it's like, oh man, where did I put that? I didn't download it. It's in PowerPoint because you asked for a PowerPoint file. It's in Word. It's over there in the chat. So here's your introduction to the nursing process. It came in, it made the slides, it even put animations in here. I would have never chose, the big writing on the orange background. You would think it's probably would have just chose the basic background and just did black text. So it really kind of makes some of this stuff come to life. You can obviously come in and add different images or dialogue. You can always open your Copilot and do your designer in this space. But think about how long it would have taken you to just get this started, right? So you've saved at least 30 minutes on the front end just allowing them to do this. Maybe you only use 5 of these slides, or maybe you only need 1 of the slides. But in that process, it gave you that starting point. So even that in itself is a really good bang for its buck there. So just another thing to share there. Again, I could probably spend another 2 hours, sitting here talking about everything and still not cover all of it. I'm glad that you were able to join me here today. Obviously, this was the first of 5 of these sessions. So if you have other things you want to share, other things that come up, that's great. Be on the lookout for a professional development quick questionnaire just about how you thought the session went today, what you thought went well, what you thought could have been better, other things that you might want to see in the future when it comes to professional developments in the School of Nursing. And if you can fit us in your schedule in one of the other offerings, please join us. And if you have anything else you want to share, please don't hesitate to, share it with me or share it with your colleagues. Or we can all learn from each other, especially when it comes to something like this. So again, I thank you for your time today. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.